Channel update. I'm alive, hey, thanks. Life update. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. In conclusion, I believe that I have made my case. It's stream of consciousness review time, because I noted down a bunch of thoughts or reactions while playing and, well, now I'm endeavouring to compile them into something vaguely coherent. A very, very spoiler-unsafe review to reflect on where these remakes currently land from perspective of a lifelong FF7 fanboy. How magical it is to be seeing Final Fantasy VII in full swing. It was around the point of recruiting Yuffie that I finally got that comfy feeling of seeing the party together again in earnest. The way her green top and short hair complement the colour schemes of everyone else honestly has a big effect of making it all seem real. To see Cloud, Strife walking around with Tifa, Barrett and Aerith in such detail, and Nanaki and Yuffie, Vincent and Cid, or heading into the Gold Saucer with the cozy vibe of everyone being friends who would spend real recreational time together. The girls and Nanaki disappear into the park, creating space for Cloud and Barrett to be grumpy men bonding over their distaste for all the gold and glitter. This is the level of cast interaction I've been waiting for. Barrett looking out for the younger Cloud, Sass and Kate Sith for his Shinra connections, Aerith and Tifa talking about boys, Vincent and Cid being lads and dads, or Yuffie constantly hugging onto Cloud, Aerith or Nanaki and generally just bringing so much energy to the scenes. And of course, I have to mention.
Oh, hey. Perfect timing. I was just about to come find you.
The only person from the village I remember is you.
Huh? Oh. Okay then. And the rest of them I know. You were there for me. You saved me before. Now it's my turn. Cloud? Something wrong?
No. Nothing. It's just hot.
And when exactly did you promise him that?
Sometime.
Alright, Mr. Secretive. You do you. I can't remember a time like this. A time when we were this close.
Gentlemen, traces of two pasts, on the way to a smile, Advent Children. That was cathartic. Finally unleashing Elena was great as well. I became such a fan of her after the Turks book. Rushing into the ancient temple may look above the Turks' pay grade, but then I remember that whole ordeal where they put an end to the world-scorching ultimate summon Zirconiade and the Jade weapon. The Turks have strong enough personalities that whenever they show up, it briefly turns the dialogue and fight choreography into something reminiscent of Advent Children. Can't wait for the PC release so we can mod out the HUD and record them without the battle menu. This really is the best cast. I've waited so long to get Tifa, Aerith and Yuffie just hanging out, and everyone doting on Nanaki. It does the heart good to hear them casually calling him by his true name, considering in the original game you have to set their names at debut so it can't be changed. Beyond the party, it's just generally nice to put so many faces to names, like Marlene's mother Eleanor, Barrett's wife Myrna, Esther, Chocobo Billy and so forth. Zack's parents are his spitting image. And speaking of which, I did notice a marked improvement to the facial animation in this game. I wish they did something with the idle poses though. Every character awkwardly standing in a rigid neutral pose is something I was hoping they would recognise as needing improvement. They didn't make any attempt to fix the hideous lighting issues when looking at the in-game character's front on either, unfortunately. though obviously the big point of the visuals is in getting to see more locations remade with a modern level of 3D skill, since Disc 1 comprises the largest chunk of Final Fantasy VII. Stepping out and seeing the scale of the grasslands is a pretty accurate recreation of the feeling when you originally leave Midgar and realise there's a whole world out there. It's almost a bit dizzying. It easily outclasses the return visits to these areas in Crisis Core or Dirge of Cerberus. Even if Calm was technically larger in Dirge, Rebirth's rendition of the town has a more interesting layout and overall vibe. Similarly, while Crisis Core lets us explore multiple levels of Junon, the inner mall area from Rebirth is a much more organic way of adding complexity to the simple town layout. Or the Midgar wastelands in Coral. While I'd hate to visit such a barren place in real life, I've been seeing these rocky environments in Advent Children and Crisis Core for so much of my life that it's amazing to get in control of Cloud and explore them. Combat in the game was fantastic. Cloud's air combos are super sick since FF7 combat has always been aerial in the compilation. Even just for recording comparison footage, going back to when you could only do like 3 poor hits against a Wyvern before plummeting back down was painful. The returning characters have refinements which will make it hard to return to Remake, such as Aerith's previous heavy attack now being a charge of her basic attack, letting her add a more interesting warp ability, Cloud's ranged blade beams, or Tifa being given an alternate power-up to pick dependent on whether she wants physical or magic damage. While the new playable characters Nanaki and Cait Sith feel totally unique from the rest. I played as Cait Sith, voluntarily. Even if only for a little bit, there were times where I said, you know what, Cait Sith's RNG mechanics are interesting. That is a victory on part of Rebirth, because otherwise speaking, I think I've always done my best to keep him out of play. Not out of disrespect. Cait's relationship to the group becomes super wholesome in the later works, but because his combat is ordinarily just too weird compared to the straightforward action you get from Cloud. I would have loved to have Sid and Vincent too, but I understand that they've got to save something for the next game, and I'm glad that they were still relevant in the story despite not being playable. You've got to give them a pass on that anyway, since they went the extra mile to give Sephiroth a moveset for the single chapter he's available, and do the same for Zack despite only getting 2 fights. Remake was one of the smartest action RPG systems I've encountered with regards to mixing ATB and action combat, and Rebirth's battle system is better. Combo attacks add more variety, perfect guarding increases complexity through the risk-reward, and the synergy strikes introduce a mini-goal to keep track of in each encounter as you build meter. The last phase of Genova Lifeklinger, where Cloud leaps down, then the side panel just displays everyone joined the party to carve their rage and sorrow upon her putrid flesh, is low-key a very badass moment. I didn't think anything of it the first time, but replaying sections to grab footage, that part gave me chills actually. Such a sick way of using its game mechanics for an extended purpose. Even from the demo, my immediate impression was already that it would be a Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom situation, in the sense of unlocking a lot of combat, exploration, and loadout freedom in the formula and going, the one before was a tech demo, now here's the real game. In Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, you can swim. What purpose it serves, I don't know, but it's nice to have the option. Having party formations quickly accessible means that it's easy and fluent to make use of every party member, instead of sticking to one trio the entire time, fixing one complaint I had of the original where using anyone other than Cloud, Barret and Tifa is a hassle. Being able to rotate teams without Cloud keeps combat fresh, since older Final Fantasy titles would usually lock the protagonist in play. The sidelined party members still battling from the perimeter is a very nice decision too, since it means everyone can feel involved. Given how it worked in the previous game, I didn't really expect anything else, but I do feel slightly ripped off that the enemy skill materia didn't let us steal Beta, Aqualung or Trine. However, White Wind, now known as Soothing Breeze, is even more useful than its original version, even though that one is already integral to playing well in FF7. Catch the very end of a battle with Soothing Breeze and it continues running out of combat, essentially giving a free Cura All. Sonic Boom was way too good to be given as early as it was, and I got a ton of mileage from the Plasma Discharge skill as well. It's nice to see that many things actually had their utility enhanced in the new balancing instead of scaled back. Looking at the overworld gameplay next, I love the larger fields and wider camera perspective to accommodate. the closer an overworld gets to resembling the Xenoblade experience, the more I'll like it. Though admittedly, at first glance, the world wasn't quite as large as I'd hoped, since the next stop is almost always in direct view. Stepping out of Calm into the grasslands, you can already see the swamp if you look for it. Junon is just around the corner from the Mithril Mines. You can see Mount Coral and the Gold Saucer from just beyond Costa del Sol. Nibelheim is just past Cosmo Canyon, and when you reach it, the mountain with the reactor is in view. It's a bit jarring when Kate Sith tells us to keep an eye out for a jungle when the Gongaga region is already visible, or the ancient temple flashes back to something supposedly a few hours ago, despite being about 10 minutes earlier in gameplay. The buggy is neat, I'm glad they actually put it in the game, but if you were taking the story path, it serves its role by taking you like 2 minutes down the road before ditching it. On the other hand, I had zero faith they would let us freely control the tiny Bronco through the ocean, so even though there were few reasons to do so, I give them props for it. There's some trickery going on which threw me for a loop when first attempting to guess at the scale of the game, since as far as I can tell, the field map does not actually conform to the world map. Calm is just the tiniest section on the world map, where you can barely make out the features it has in the region overview. Because of this, initially I was thinking, okay, if this aligns to the original FF7, then this game is humongous, and I've got a long walk south and around ahead of me to reach the swamp. In reality though, it turns out that everything is crunched more closely together, which is where my confusion came from. I don't think the scale or direction line up if you go to the northern edge and look over to Midgar, which was my first point of confusion. Something about it is off. If you're expecting the original's overworld layout and try to reconcile that with the contradictions which already exist between Rebirth's two maps, then it appears certain features such as the grasslands are duplicated, the road to Midgar is misplaced, and the mine just doesn't geographically make sense in how it stretches to Junon. Yet at the same time, I left Cosmo Canyon at around 53 hours into the game. That's huge. In the original, you'd probably reach it around the 10-hour mark, and that's with Midgar. From there, even though Nibelheim is the very next stop, it still took me about 30 more hours to finish. It was so hard to resist rushing the storyline, but I wanted to explore everything. Thankfully, the quests and cutscenes do eventually take you to just about every single thing which looks interesting as you traverse the regions. Nearly any time there's a door you want to go through, it will eventually be opened for something. World quests admittedly were fairly repetitive tasks and therefore could be argued as filler content, but I was too drawn into the magic of getting to see the land turned into real, believable locations to care. And it was all worth it in the end, since the Proto-Relic questline eventually leads into what I might consider the coolest Gilgamesh in the franchise. The intro where he haikus his way into the signature morphing time was a total mic drop, and the steampunk take on his armor is a feast for the eyes.
But hope springs anew, for the Genji is made whole, perfect and sublime. So for Gilgamesh, it's morphin' time!
The battle is fun, Gilgamesh is always fun. I enjoyed the chaos of him being a buffoon, but also an incredibly fearsome warrior. Excalibur in this game truly embodies Gilgamesh in a way I'd never have even dreamed up. The first time it hit, I couldn't even process what just happened. On the corner of the screen, it literally looked like Missing Number had for some reason popped up over Tifa. The numbers all layer up like a glitch block, where despite all hitting for meager damage, the sheer amount of them totally shreds your health. It's a stroke of genius, really. That's so creative and so perfect for Gilgamesh. Alexander's here too, and that's worth some points on its own. The boy showing up tends to become an indicator of quality for an FF entry in its own right. There is a lot to digest with the world intel and crafting and synergy strikes and affinity and all that, and they really went all in on the minigames, which I'm not complaining about. That shows they respect the essence of 1997's Final Fantasy VII, but I can see where others might get exhausted. This may be blasphemous, but Queen's Blood is the first time I've actually enjoyed one of Final Fantasy's card games. Though Fort Condor reared its ugly head, and that is something I will complain about. I didn't like it in the original, I didn't like it in Intermission, and you cannot make me like it in Rebirth. That final match was brutally infuriating, and I almost gave up on the world intel after several hours of beating my head against it. Sometimes you're awakening towers like Breath of the Wild, sometimes you're repairing rest stops like Tears of the Kingdom, sometimes you're raising a relic and following its path of light to find something like Shadow of the Colossus. The Dolphin in Under Junon now has a whole Wave Racer course, Barrett has an arcade shooter segment because why not? The Gold Saucer will have you playing clones of Punch-Out or Star Fox, and the Chocobo racing has been expanded to feature a huge amount of racetracks and music. Collecting quick resources everywhere and having an instantly accessible steed feel very reminiscent of Metal Gear Solid 5. I kept thinking about the part in Brental Floss's Final Fantasy VII with lyrics, where he just starts going insane yelling about all the minigames. That's more fitting now than ever. Is that not sign enough for how phenomenal a remake this is? With the larger fields, the terrain jumping, the less restricted materia loadouts, and the silly minigames, this one situates itself better as a remake of Final Fantasy VII than the previous game, in my opinion. Not that Remake failed at it in any capacity, if anything, its more limited scope makes it serve fantastically as an adaptation of FF7's initial illusion that Midgar will be the whole game. But my eyes can perceive Rebirth as a facelift of 1997's video game a lot easier. And the music! It's gonna take so long to get the whole thing, waiting for at least another soundtrack plus, and then someone to upload all the unreleased variations which inevitably slip through the cracks. But there are so many sick tracks, it's hard to pick a favourite. I'm gonna pause here and, kinda spoil that this is the part of the review where I just play snippets of music and ramble about them for 15 actual minutes of this hour 15 video, because soundtrack is one of my big passions and I just don't want to cut myself short, even if it murders any pacing this script may have had. So if you want to skip ahead to where I begin looking into the game's writing implications, there's a timestamp in the bottom left. Because otherwise, yeah, it's genuinely just 15 minutes of me playing music clips. If you think that's too much, then oh boy, you just wait until I eventually stop being lazy enough to go narrate my top gaming heroes and villain posts, which together have literally an hour and 10 minutes of video inserts to showcase. Anyway, where was I? The music of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. The most striking was probably one of those chosen by the planet's horror arrangements in the Nibelheim flashback. Or Gus's theme for how catchy it is. I was a big fan of the Materia Guardian theme as well. One of the sickest things about the 7R project being so over the top is that, like every boss theme, becomes a 3 to 4 phase symphonic rampage. Phase 1 is obviously the same Let the Battles Begin we already had in Remake, but once it begins mixing in those triumphant and heroic sections of those chosen by the planet in Phase 2, it gets so awesome. Obviously we've had the world's enemy since Crisis Core and recently young Sephiroth's theme in Ever Crisis, but still I've been interested in the prospect of pre-fall Sephiroth music for so long, and it doesn't disappoint. But the music decision that impressed me the most was taking the Weapon Raid theme and reconfiguring it to be a unique military march for the Junon capital. That makes so much sense. Though the choral performance of Rufus's welcoming ceremony, which happens on the other side of the city, was also quite legendary. soundtrack isn't out yet, so I can't check, but I believe I heard every region focusing on a different section of the main theme, which I thought was another very smart musical decision. It helps to keep things fresh in the different fields and draws attention to how the main theme's emotional progression mirrors that of FF7's storyline itself. I also have to gush, because one of the few things I was set on really wanting to hear was a more heavenly rendition of One Winged Angel to balance the scary version from Remake. And it did in fact appear to accompany the Bizarro Sephiroth battle. Which, by the way, I actually really like the decision to include here in Part 2. This way each game can have a different form to fight. The verdict is still out on whether that makes up for no Birth of a God, but man, the OST cannot release soon enough. My call for the final rendition in Part 3's Safer Sephiroth battle. I reckon that it will be something in the area of a 13-phase symphonic suite, becoming the crowning jewel of FF7 Remake's signature long multi-phase battles. One Winged Angel is known to be directly inspired by a lot of other songs, such as Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze, The link is immediately obvious, but just to really hammer it in, compare that sample I just played to the Earthbound Papa's performance of One Winged Angel. And the main string motif from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. As revealed by Uematsu himself. Est-one's Interius Ira Vehementi and Veni Veni Venias are operatic movements in the Carmina Burana cantata.
Est-one Interius Ira Vehementi in amaritudine locor me eventi actus de materiatis elementi similis sum folio decoludum venti.
The main influence I want to pick out here is Stravinsky's Rite of Spring concert. The Rite of Spring is a huge inspiration on popular composers such as John Williams' work on Jaws and Star Wars. I remember the first time I played the Nibelheim Incident movement from the Final Symphony concert at a squad night, my brother instantly said it sounded like Star Wars, and then as I listened through with that perspective, I agreed quite heavily. Hence, it's also an integral inspiration for One Winged Angel. Many of the sections sound reminiscent, but especially the appropriately named Glorification of the Chosen One, which is bang on for Sephiroth's opening drums. Whether coincidence or not, much of Sephiroth's storyline even matches the titles in the Rite. Ritual of Abduction for when he was stolen from Lucrezia, Mystic Circles of the Young Girls for his desire to murder Aerith before her magic activates, Glorification of the Chosen One as he ascends to the Divine, and Evocation of the Ancestors as he seeks to redeem the mother he mistakenly believes to be an ancient. So I dream that in the finale they'll lean into it and give us the full-scale Sephiroth concert we deserve. Rebirth is pretty much there already, with its 7-phase suite and total runtime of about 35 minutes based on the uploads I'm presently seeing around, so I can only see the Seraph battle going further with an increased amount of distinct phases to hit that Rite of Spring quota. It does ham up the City of the Ancients, and I mourn that we didn't get the opportunity to properly explore it since that was close to my number one thing I was waiting for in the remakes. But hey, at least we got a new rendition of Listen to the Cries of the Planet and The Promised Land. The game's ballad, No Promises to Keep, was a real surprise as well. Remake is already a very exaggerated saga, and Aerith randomly singing on stage tests the limit of how much I can accept. But it does feel in line with Julia writing Eyes on Me in Final Fantasy VIII, or Garnet singing Memories of Life for Zidane in Final Fantasy IX. In some sense, these cheesy love songs are the heart of Final Fantasy. Thematically and tonally, I would say that. It's been ages since we got a love song like this from the series, and as strange as the whole situation may be, I kind of like that they committed to it. Feels like they're respecting the place VII has in series history. Final Fantasy VII propelled Square into a new dimension of gaming back in 1997. Rebirth is meant to do something similar. Square Enix are known for their graphics and their music, so here they give their A-game on both. Uematsu's original melodies are legendary and need no further introduction, but I also love how it takes literally 1 second of song to identify Hamazu's work in the Sephiroth battles. Because the godly aesthetic of the battles line up, they let him do another slow build choir like Born Anew when you fight Orphan in FF13. Final Fantasy hogs all the best composers, I swear man. Last year had all the makings of an unprecedentedly fierce contest in the OST category. Under any other circumstances, I would have loved to give it to Atelier Ryza 3, because Ryza instrumentation is always super high quality. This entry has the spectacle of Atelier attempting their very own One-Winged Angel clone in The Place to Come Back To Someday. And Epoch closes out as the trilogy's snazziest final boss theme. I think about this short trumpet bit a lot. Tears of the Kingdom also makes a great case, with more of Breath of the Wild's signature ambient, moody pieces. And grand battle tracks. A occasionally injected with interesting corruptions to reflect the story focus on rampant ancient technologies. Xenoblade also reaches for the trophy by being similarly high quality in production, with the benefit of having more cinematic range than Atelier or most other non-Final Fantasy JRPGs really. And holy moly, Joanne Hogg is back for an emotional franchise-ending song.
You're standing at a loss in front of a door that's been closed for so long. With your foreseeing eyes, what do you see?
I was shocked when the base game of Xenoblade 3 didn't end with some reprised version of Small 2 of Pieces, but it turns out I was just too quick on that call. Instantly becomes the top vocal theme in the series. I have a history with One Last You, but dang it man, Joanne Hogg is just too powerful. Those are just the RPG picks, not even bringing in bangers like Gravity Circuit, Ghost Runner 2 or Mario Wonder. But unfortunately for all of them and their own incredible musical triumphs, Final Fantasy XVI also released, and you just don't win against FF in their bigger scale symphonies. Even if Ascension were the only track in the score, it likely still would have made a solid case for taking home the gold. As if those are not the coolest lyrics you've ever heard. And yet I am calling Rebirth their A game. Its upcoming soundtrack release reportedly numbers around 400 songs, added onto the 360 or so when Remake Intergrade, Intermission, and their unreleased BGM variations are collated, and we're genuinely on course to fly past 1,000 new FF7 related tracks by the time the curtains are finally called on this project in 2028 or so. Downright ludicrous amounts of music on display here. 10 years ago, the standard sat around 4 to 6 hours for a big budget JRPG. I used to make a consistent effort of getting into bed early for a meditative few hours, sinking into the emotional journey of Fate Extra CCC's music as it veers further and further into despair, for them to just barely snatch back hope at the end. All the natural beauties perfectly envisioned through Hitoshi Sakimoto's orchestras in Final Fantasy XII. And to be fair, 5-ish hour soundtracks haven't really disappeared, i.e. Atelier Ryza, Shin Megami Tensei 5, Star Ocean 6, Crosscode, Harvestella, Blue Reflection, and Second Light, etc. But nowadays, as the production values in cinematic games just get higher and higher, the upper limit has ballooned to where it's shockingly common to see them settling around 7 to 9 hours, such as Final Fantasy 15 and 16, Xenoblade 3, Sea of Stars, Octopath Traveler 2, Kingdom Hearts 3, Fire Emblem 3 Houses, Tales of Arise, and much more. However, showing up just about everything ever that isn't a long-running MMO or live service game, Final Fantasy VII Remake and its expansion together, covering 1/3 of the total project, are 17.5 hours of music. Not even including the additional 2 hours from the jukebox songs, because I chucked them under a different album and rarely remember they exist. 17. The 3.5 hour intermission soundtrack is legitimately the same length as its actual gameplay. That 3-hour story has a soundtrack the same length as some 30-hour games from previous console generations. FF7 Remake does have something of a cheat advantage since it's mostly just mixing and matching Uematsu's original motifs into various emotions and instrumentations with a comparatively minimal amount of truly new melodies. But still, 17 hours and only 1/3 of the way there. This is not a trilogy at this point. Getting through all 3 soundtracks will essentially just be a complete 4th game in the series itself. But as a reviewer, the main parts I find myself interested in talking about are those pertinent to the story and the setting. What has it done, and what does it mean? On the whole, it's just Remake's second part, right? The same design philosophy is in effect, taking everything which comprised the original concept and maxing out the scale, particularly focusing on narrative expansion to fill gaps in the original world and interlock events more tightly. It backs up Remake's decision of introducing Sephiroth much earlier than he should have been by giving more persistence to him and the black-robed cultists. There's a track on the FF7 score titled Chasing the Black-Caped Man, but it isn't until Rebirth where the visuals properly reveal us as chasing the black-caped men across the continents. In the original, they're just occasionally spotted around some towns. In a similar vein, Sephiroth possessing Cloud during the new section in Gongaga reveals to us early that this is even possible, giving precedent for when he eventually tries to forfeit the black materia to the enemy. Seeing him take up the stance was the kind of moment that just makes you stop and go, no. This plotline eventually develops toward a sick shot of Cloud standing in flames, paralleling Sephiroth's iconic scene during the incident. Vincent's history as a Turk brings benefit to the story since he can use that experience to chase the Turks' radio frequencies. Another big change is working Yuffie into Under Junon and how her event line unfolds from there. Crisis Core and Remake have made the Wutai War into a much bigger point of context for the setting. Yuffie's motivations are thus provided proper definition. It's not just any materia she's after, but specifically the Magnus materia which Shinra are attempting to synthesize. The core of a weapon, which were originally just references to Evangelion, are turned into Magnus materia as well, and the race to be the first to claim these materia establishes urgency and political enmity between Yuffie and Rufus. A strong link is made between all these events. Introducing Sid early was another pleasant surprise. Not huge on his redesign though. Sid is the only member in the cast who doesn't really align to his previous designs. Why is he handsome? Why is Sid Highwind handsome, okay? I get what they're doing, making him an all-American astronaut hero type, and it likely will further the impact of his abuse on Shera by first making him seem like a stand-up guy. But it's so weird not seeing him as an alcoholic grease monkey goblin man. Recognizing the daughter of a Falna is a bit unnecessary too. Not everything has to be that connected. Next, having Tifa fall into the livestream and witness all that metaphysical memory phenomena will ease us into accepting that such a thing can happen when we get to Midil in the next game. And even the whispers, despite ruining the shot composition and thematic integrity of any scene they touch, they're just always there annoyingly in the background. Anytime there is an important moment or cool looking scene, it comes with the caveat that you just have to try and zone out the whispers. But yes, even they have a purpose in making Sephiroth's turn to the divine not feel so out of left field. It's by taking the reins of fate and peering into multiple realities that he seeks to claim a higher, perfected existence. The alternate dimension is merely a larger version of the conceptual space Aerith speaks to Cloud from before leaving the party, which is where I figured it would slot in. This and the higher dimension are likely how they'll make sense of Safer Sephiroth's heavenly arena in the finale as well. Everything this does is in expansion of Final Fantasy VII's original storyline. Since release, I have dug my heels in and said that all Remake has done is draw itself out into some big, long, messy arc, which will ultimately hit all the same points and terminate in the same place. The story all actually went just about how I expected it to. In fact, my original prediction was that the first few chapters of Remake's sequel would be a streamlined retelling of Crisis Core. Obviously there's no point to that now since the unthinkable happened and they remastered Crisis Core. But I was on the money there anyway. Still starts with Zack. I always enjoy seeing the juxtaposition between Cloud and Zack, since the latter has real first-class strength. Man's just straight up throws a street lamp at a helicopter, with like a meter of concrete on the end. Figured the Unknown Journey was purely a marketing vehicle to give Zack more spotlight, since, like Sephiroth, he's too popular to be kept as secretive as he used to be. It was. Bonus points because I anticipated it more or less following the framework from Maiden Who Travels the Planet, where he and Aerith help fight Sephiroth from the other side of the livestream. And that's essentially how it unfolded once adjusted for Rebirth's reality mechanics. Somewhere in there, I've lost it so I can't pull it up, but somewhere in there was a proper recreation of Advent Children's shot of Meteor, furthering my claim that Remake's Arbiter of Fate only pulled those shots straight out of the film as a reference and cost-saving measure. One video I made toyed with the proposition that Sephiroth is enacting Loveless on a grand scale. The parting line for this game was "No promises await at Journey's End," with Journey's End being the climactic stage of the poem. Perhaps I was on the money there. One or two decisions I didn't jive with because they invalidate some niche interactions from the side storybooks. The particular offender were the Turks escorting Tsung out of the temple, which ruins a sweet, emotional moment from The Kids Are Alright, where Elena runs up to hug him and then sasses Reno and Rude for being too embarrassed to do the same. Copping out on Dyne's suicide was weak, since that's one of the hardest hitting moments in FF7. And having the Whispers pull up the Buster Sword during Aerith's prayer instead of a deluded Cloud attempting to slash her himself is also a cowardly change. In general, Aerith's death was pretty mishandled. If you were to somehow play the original without being spoiled on its plot twists, Sephiroth taking her life is a shocking moment that hurts because of how swift it is. One moment Aerith is with us preparing to use her ultimate materia, the next, her body hits the floor. In the remakes, however, they foreshadow it in a very non-subtle manner during the first game, have Marlene directly mention that Sephiroth will kill her, do all this extra work to establish that this is a branching point for realities where Aerith likely survived in another timeline to ease the pain, have her stick around as an apparition for the lengthy final boss rush, and then give her ghost an emotional parting in the epilogue, all done before finally instructing the player to process her departure. It's hauntingly beautiful in the original how Aerith's theme plays uninterrupted through the boss fight. so the decision to only keep that in the first phase of the Jenova Life Clinger battle, as much as I do love FF7 Remake's dedication to high production multi-phase boss battles and music, the change ruins that emotional hit. At the same time though, it is palpable how full of anger and sorrow each member of the party is as they tear into Jenova, and that hits very hard in a different sort of way.
I'll kill you!
Aerith!
The moment where Barrett sees Cloud and Aerith, glares at Sephiroth and just screams, "I'll kill you." That is a father's rage. That's the pain of a man further along in life, believing that he's failed these kids he was protecting. The big thing Sephiroth said was 7 seconds till the end, because it takes about 7 seconds for him to fall from the sky and impale Aerith. But the way it actually goes in Rebirth, that whole segment from walking up to Aerith at the altar through to the final cutscene where she finally says goodbye, took me about 3 hours because Octa/Prime. So instead of 7 seconds and then it's too late, it was closer to like 11,000 seconds before we begin grieving. But we've already seen Remake falter in this regard, with just about everyone in Sector 7 seemingly escaping the plate drop. I suppose that's fair enough, since it's not like Aerith would have left all those people to die when she runs off to grab Marlene in the original, and it has been illustrated multiple times that Cloud sometimes spots her ghost. But spotlighting those things this much dulls the edge on the moments which are meant to cut. Final Fantasy VII is a devastating game, and the remakes fumble through many of the defining turns. But I get it, they have to go above and beyond with every little thing. I recognise and respect that as a deliberate stylistic decision. Remake has been nothing if not extravagant. Look at the Don Corneo rap battle, which not only comes out of nowhere, but is annoyingly good, or Love Live Gold Saucer Project for crying out loud. For good and bad, Remake goes the distance. On the whole, most of the alterations were positive, and they really throw in some bones for the deep lore fans. Me. That is to say, if you don't know Before Crisis, haven't read Maiden Who Travels the Planet and Traces of Two Pasts, played Final Fantasy X and Xenogears, or watched John Carpenter's The Thing, then Rebirth is laughing at you in the details. Yes, FF7 Rebirth, I am the one person who recognises Dene in that background painting. I remember the attack on Calm that Broden alludes to, and understand that Barrett claiming Shinra crafted a cover story when the coral reactor exploded is actually a complex situation to unravel. That's the kind of energy which is found everywhere you look. This is made by people who adore Final Fantasy VII, and like I suggested years back, establishes that the remake saga exists to unify the extended lore into a version of the Jenova War that can stylistically coexist with the compilation. There's a constant stream of references to the expanded universe, whether cheeky nods like Kate Sith's Fortune imploring Cloud to protect what he cherishes most, or more substantial additions like stumbling upon Cisne in Gongaga. Zack's parents told her to move in. Nice to see she actually did manage to get away from the Turks, ticking off one out of the 4 or so characters who I have been wanting incorporated. Elf was mentioned during Tifa's section in Traces of Two Pasts, so being lenient, I'll mark her as spoken for as well. Though this will make me enemies, that now leaves Genesis and Shulk as the two I really want to encounter in some capacity during the time the remakes have left. All the way through Rebirth, I was keeping an ear out for anything at all in Loveless or the Cetra religion pointing to the existence of Minerva as well. The first vague nod was Aerith being surprised to learn that her people did not historically worship a deity. Other than that, it was only one mural of a golden warrior goddess in the ancient temple which seemed to be representing her. Interestingly, the opposite wall features a near-identical silhouette drawn above Jenova's monstrous form, perhaps offering us the fascinating nugget of information that Jenova's female form may have been specifically stolen from Minerva herself. The Hall of Effigies 2 features something along this line, since the skeletal statues resemble Jenova, and so it may be that there was something like that in Cetra society or religion that she assimilated her current monstrous appearance from. That she reverts to a blue-skinned, pink-eyed form in the stasis chamber may indicate her prior conquest occurred on Gi. Or otherwise, another possibility is that the appearance may be imitating Lucrezia. When first discovered in the 2,000-year-old strata of Earth, Jenova is shown to be in a state somewhere between monster and man, vastly different to how we encounter her at Nibelheim. Since she's awake to psychically unseal the reactor door, perhaps she sensed Sephiroth's arrival and peered inside his memories to take the form which would most effectively lure him to her side. Having an excuse to head into the Coral Mines obviously only happened because Before Crisis made them a location worth revisiting. Nanaki's trial at the ancient temple also begins with his capture as seen in Before Crisis. Tifa's cat is heard from. This is good. They keep traces of two pasts relevant for all Tifa's memories of Nibelheim, and we catch the end of Aerith's tale on the ferry as well when she mentions Faz. Her flashback on the train with Effelna is lifted straight from the book as well. Perhaps most controversially, Chadley's position as a cyborg, which is news to me by the way, I never got that information in Remake, is a long lead-in for Hojo eventually becoming a digital lifeform to hijack the body of Vice. Pretty much everything gets streamlined into the next event, whereas blank spots in the 1997 world such as Gongaga have been expanded into key locations. In the original, there's an inn you can buy in Costa del Sol. It doesn't really do anything, but you can. In Rebirth, Johnny buys it instead, and that becomes the plot of what was originally just a location to pass through. Searching for a working terminal provides legitimate justification to revisit the Mount Nibel reactor and Shinra Manor, where in the original both were left majority optional. Most significantly though are the revelations surrounding the mysterious Gi tribe. Very much appreciated that greater insight into them. I wouldn't say it was on my bingo card heading into Rebirth, but on replays past I have actually thought before that I wanted to know more of this intelligent, non-human race sealed deep beneath Cosmo Canyon. Them being aliens isn't something I would have pinned them for, but I like that storyline a lot. As we descend into the Cave of the Gi, I was drawn to the cliff sides and kept thinking, that's the livestream, right? Why is it red? Surely that's important somehow. And it turns out that yeah, when you assess the Gi spectres, their bio draws specific attention to the red miasma. The way it reads to me then is that this red life stream is the spirit energy from their homeworld, as opposed to the green energy from Gaia's life forms. Gi Natak's red miasma and Sephiroth's purple are focused upon in the same scene, so I would interpret that to mean the spiritual energy in Jenova's original homeworld was that colour. So now we have Gaia, Gi, and Jenova's world in the galaxy. But the entire point of them setting up this tidbit about lifestream colour differing between planets is a means for them to subtly reconfirm Final Fantasy X's canonicity within the backdrop of the setting. This suggestion originates from fan theories regarding a character in Final Fantasy X-2 named Shinra, who muses about potentially extracting energy from their planet's spirit realm and travelling to other worlds, which is introduced as a potentially official connection through both the Final Fantasy X and X-2 Ultimania, Final Fantasy VII Ultimania Omega, Final Fantasy VII Remake Ultimania, etc., and reconfirmed through a number of interviews. This isn't merely a case of the out-of-touch creators speaking nonsense to fill the air in an interview environment, but a consistent thread of discussion over the years. The most recent of which being from a video interview conducted to reflect on the production of the FF10 and X-2 HD remaster, which coincidentally went up not long before the release of FF7 Remake. The relevant quote goes, "So there's this young boy called Shinra who appears in Final Fantasy X-2, and as you would expect from that name, there are fan theories that he might be connected to the Shinra company from Final Fantasy VII. The scenario writer Nojima-san has not made any official pronouncements about it, but as a kind of secret history, he thought that Shinra from X-2 might grow up and his descendants several generations later possibly go on to found the Shinra company. The Shinra Building's Memorial Hall has a photo featuring what appears to be the descendant of Shinra from FF10-2, and the greater galactic focus that the Gi brings suggests this was not an empty reference. Before vanishing, Gi Natak solidifies this notion by begging to be let go from this endless dream, which is an obvious reference to the plot of FF10. This all gets galvanized as an intentional link in the Temple of the Ancients, where Aerith attempts to quell the Lifestream's rage by doing a dance. She literally does ascending. little orbs of light come to her like fireflies. It's possible that Jessie, Biggs, and Wedge appearing during Aerith's concert as well was her sending them. But when Cloud defeats troopers while separated from her in the temple, their despair ends up transforming them into monsters. Imagery evocative of Spira. All things considered, maybe the odd dimension where the temple resides is something akin to Gaia's version of the Farplane. So within the franchise, it's really widening the world. If we look beyond, then it still remains true that Rebirth amplifies pretty much every one of Final Fantasy VII's key intertextual inspirations in the way you would want it to. First order of business, as with most things in life, Xenogears.
Behold, the true nature of reality. The planet encompasses a multitude of worlds, ever unfolding. Nevertheless, their loss is not to be mourned. For it is not death, but a homecoming that awaits them. And in the planet's embrace, all life is as one. I give you my blessing.
Something I've predicted within Remake was that introducing Fate into the mix would inevitably culminate in Final Fantasy VII reclaiming some of the more mystical elements which were lost when Tetsuya Takahashi's concept draft was shelved and split off to become Xenogears instead. Here we see this. Sephiroth reveals to Cloud the way in which he traverses higher dimensions through a number of circular gates which resemble the Path of Sephiroth, and burns potential timelines as a source of energy a la the Zohar's simulation of event pathways. Sephiroth Reborn's head is fought by itself at one point, which resembles Krelian and Zed. And with respects to Xenogears' overall Abrahamic, Kabbalistic aesthetic, Sephiroth's divinity feels properly religious this time through the glorious battle music and holy attack names. And the Tree of Life can be briefly spotted within Sephiroth Reborn's Materia Core. These next two links aren't new, but I don't think I've ever paid proper attention to the Genova doll and Deus having the same face before, or the small section of the party stuck on the tiny Bronco at sea potentially being analogous to Faye and Ellie's time stranded. The more interesting order of business, however, is that which ties back to FF7's filmic horror inspirations and how Rebirth incorporates them better than ever, using horror homage as the justification for committing to keeping Sephiroth ever present. I do get the initial aversion to Sephiroth being so abundant in the narrative. It's brought up often how in the original his implementation was revealed to have taken note from Jaws. This information comes from an interview in 2020, where producer Yoshinori Kitase reflects that the way we handled Sephiroth in the original Final Fantasy VII was to hide him, hold him back. You may not know this, but I was inspired by the movie Jaws, which took a similar approach of teasing this powerful presence but never fully showing you the shark until later in the story. We wanted to build him up as this really big, powerful character in people's minds. By only referring to him indirectly, it created this feeling of fear and oppression, so when he makes his first appearance, it's a big deal. He's kept hidden away, only surfacing in those dangerous moments where he's on the hunt and intending to kill. It's a stark departure from the franchise's prior villains. The first Final Fantasy puts you onto Garland almost immediately. Emperor Mattias and Kefka are both met quite early as well. Sephiroth's presence is totally different, carrying an air of suspense and so turning the game into more of a thriller. Sephiroth is depicted as weightless despite being a 7-foot-tall, well-built man adorned in armor and a massive sword. Yet he can also send someone flying across an entire hallway with one flick of his wrist. Sephiroth's features don't conventionally make sense, occupying the abject, the uncanny valley, betraying the expected functioning of biology and physics to create the fear that this is something else in the shape of a human. Sephiroth is a creature of horror, yes, and if I have to point out only one thing that I really like in Remake and Rebirth, perhaps my favourite part of the whole production is that they make Sephiroth scary again. As a fan of the original, you obviously aren't expecting to see Sephiroth in Midgar at all. Those first encounters come as a shock. In Cloud's first flashback about the demon, the discordant strings feel like spiders crawling over you or a chill running down your back. Then he eases up, turns to leave, and bam, a horror sting. You've just walked right into Sephiroth. Why is he here? How is he here? I don't know, but now I'm caught off guard. After Cloud chases him away, you turn the corner and finally see Aerith. It's a respite after that sudden jump scare. You walk up to be comforted by the cute pink flower girl, and then Sephiroth suddenly looms over her from out of frame. It hits. That's one of my favourite shots in the entire project. These moments persist throughout. Remake's dedication to restoring or even amplifying Sephiroth's original intimidation is incredible. Listen to the xylophone in Marco Poisoning, which makes it sound like traditional horror film soundtrack. Or the drawn-out piano march in Strength Through Suffering, which exemplifies Cloud's panic at the hallucination. All three renditions of those chosen by the planet in the Nibelheim flashback are terrifying. Listen to that low note hit, and the trumpet. That's the core part of his presentation from the original, which nearly all the extended content misses the point of. Sephiroth isn't framed as just some edgy anime swordsman. He's a monster, a demon who perverts the definition of man, an abomination who crawled out of a scary movie. It's totally okay to wish he was less prevalent for personal preference or to preserve his original narrative dignity. For example, finding Sephiroth's trail of destruction with the impaled Midgar Zolom is much more artistic than it is actually being there during Rebirth. The original version creates a more organic sense of scale because the Midgar Zolom is an enemy you're intended to run from and only optionally fight it if you're replaying and want to steal Beta early. But ordinarily you're supposed to run from it as it chases you on the overworld, and unless you have the specific knowledge to poison it and abuse its AI, then you're gonna get wrecked immediately, which makes it powerful when you see the one that Sephiroth impaled. But in Rebirth, it's just another boss fight and just another Sephiroth scene. But here's where I think focusing on that interview about Jaws and Final Fantasy VII as a means to discredit the new handling of its villain begins to fall apart. Yes, it's an influence for his direction in the original game, but the shark obviously doesn't have any actual effect on the world or plot. Stumbling upon the trail of blood mirrors the foreboding mystery when the first body washes up or the violent red patches left in the sea. Then Masamune impaled into the back of President Shinra is somewhat analogous to witnessing the shark's gigantic fin breaching the water's surface. The opening bells and looping strings in Sephiroth's character theme, those chosen by the planet, are channeling the stressful energy of Jaws' main title. Beyond that, however, Sephiroth has nothing in common with a giant shark. And that's where I consider the common statement that Remake Sephiroth misses the original point by not remaining hidden to be incomplete.
Got ya!
Take it from here.
Ah!
Nice work.
Okay, hold up. Maybe I'm missing something here, but everything you've said makes Sephiroth sound like a stand-up guy.
Well, he was.
And now he's pure evil, trying to kill everyone on the planet. Help me to understand this shit.
What sets Sephiroth apart from Final Fantasy's aforementioned usual suspects is that he isn't a beastly monster, a power-lusted despot, ancient evil, or literal underworld manifestation. He's a good man. Sephiroth uses his power to protect those who struggle against violence from terrorists and fiends. He uses his position to show kindness to his subordinates, and he uses his fame to inspire those young men desperately needing a role model in the chaotic world of FF7. Unlike Chaos, the Emperor, the Cloud of Darkness, Kefka, and the like, Sephiroth was not intrinsically aiming for something higher. He is not automatically a sinister man hiding ambition to selfishly elevate himself above everyone else. It's just this one unfortunate moment of reading difficult language while in an overtired state that pushes him into delirium, and by the time he sorta wakes up from it, it's well too late. Sephiroth is a good man, gone insane after contact with a malignant, shape-shifting extraterrestrial god. A cosmic horror. Final Fantasy VII is a cosmic horror story, even in the original and especially amplified in Remake. Specifically, the biggest filmic influence on Final Fantasy VII, the biggest horror influence on Final Fantasy VII, is not Jaws. It's The Thing, from John Carpenter's film adaptation in particular, as that matches Genova's grotesque, fleshy gore more strongly. Weather scientists in the distant Antarctic lands stumble upon an alien ship, which portends calamity as the shape-shifting invader makes its way to their base and begins using its impersonations to craft discord until the group collapses from within. At this point, I'd almost consider it required watching to properly appreciate Final Fantasy VII.
Sephiroth! You killed my mom. You killed Tifa. My village. My home. I believed in you. No. Not you! Whoever the hell you are!
You know that I killed her. So, who is she? Or rather, what is she? Cloud, don't let her fool you. She has no scar.
You have no scar.
She's not
You're
Tifa.
not Tifa. You can't be. Those we hate. Those we love. Those we fear. Jenova would become anyone to fool her prey. But I'm no fool.
This is what makes Sephiroth so amazing to me in the direction Remake has taken him. The thing, Final Fantasy VII and Sephiroth are not about the beast lurking in the darkness. It's about the demon hiding in plain sight, breathing down your neck. In fact, the Trail of Blood is still a good point to look at in order to understand how the horror representation has been reworked. The blood trail is now left glowing purple like a sci-fi film, constantly bubbling and popping up as if it's still alive, which could align with the blood test scene in The Thing. And President Shinra is literally backstabbed by one of Jenova's imposters. Yes, I said imposter, because Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VII, Xenogears, and Among Us are all inspired by one primary source, the Thing from outer space and its imitating, cell-manipulating alien. Sephiroth may be faintly paying homage to Jaws, but Jenova, for all intents and purposes, is the Thing from outer space dropped straight onto Gaia, to where watching the film will actually give you a more meaningful way of contextualizing the events in Final Fantasy VII and enhance your appreciation of its place in the media sphere. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There is no time loop, reset, or rebuild in Final Fantasy VII Remake. The surface narrative of changing fate and the somewhat awkward script might mislead a player into thinking so, but look closer and you realize that no event or characterization actually supports the claim. Nothing in the setting has ever displayed even remotely that much power, and nothing in the plotline demands such a thing. Aerith and Sephiroth had future knowledge, that much seems undeniable, but to try and maneuver that into Remake being Advent Children's sequel through timey-wimey stuff is a convoluted claim that I just still don't think holds up even after 3 or 4 replays. To say nothing of the fact that this Sephiroth is nothing like the person he is in Advent Children. Here you still get some hints of his emotional response to being exiled from humanity and his desire to still find some pathway through which he can validate his existence. Whereas in Advent Children, he has absolutely zero humanity left. Case of Lifestream Black details how the Lifestream had stolen most of his memories and ego, so the only way he maintains existence is by parasitically attaching himself to Cloud's strong feelings of hatred. This reflects in his performance, where he at that point only exists to hate and be hated by Cloud. Whereas at the earlier time of FF7 and therefore Remake and Rebirth, you can read into his twisted expressions of love to the world and its people. That's misdirection, deliberate or otherwise, and the Unknown Journey is largely just a marketing vehicle so that the immensely popular Zack Fair can have a way of claiming a spotlight in the saga. No time loop. Rather, these are just the modern definitions of each character, how they act, what their powers are, and how they function in the setting. Not as any kind of supernatural continued existence, but simply that Final Fantasy VII is now being rewritten to accommodate the character depictions from the compilation. All this to say, Jenova's most recent starring role was in Turk's side story The Kids Are Alright, where they had finally given full accolades to the Thing. In that book, Kadaj uses his shapeshifting to sow discord between Kyrie, Evan, and the Turks, eventually setting the icicle in a blaze as a direct reference to the ending of The Thing. Remake and Rebirth continue in trend, really throwing the character politics into disarray through the shapeshifters systemically attacking the trust between the party. Sephiroth whispers to Cloud of Tifa's supposed death in the Nebel reactor, brainwashing him to believe that the one here must therefore be Jenova impersonating his childhood friend. Whereas Tifa and Aerith are locked onto Cloud as they seek to uncover whether he's really the man he claims to be or not. First Soldier's Glenn Lodbrok suddenly manifesting to goad Rufus into declaring war on Wutai was an imposter chasing global destabilization too. Visually, it was obvious that Glenn was an arm of Jenova, since he had the miasma at his feet, and the Jenova synths were just barely audible at the very back of the soundtrack mix. This further leaves me wondering about whether Lucia and Matt, who were mentioned to be moving with Avalanche, have been compromised as well. Sephiroth's shapeshifting is more insidious than ever. To accompany it, Jenova is just as horrific. The specimen, found in strata dating back 2,000 years, smiled with what could only be described as ethereal grace, the report reads. A chilling record to better highlight the obsession and eldritch call she imbues into Sephiroth and all those in the reunion. In this representation of events, Jenova unlocks the sealed door on her own to welcome her son in, displaying some psychic understanding of advanced technologies which elevates her extraterrestrial mystique, and therein explains how she was able to hijack Shinra's VR experience in the Great Destroyer cutscene. Additionally, the spiky mountains are seen as a geographical feature not only in the Nebel region and the North Crater, but also in the land of the Gi, which might be hinting that this is actually a relic of Jenova beginning to terraform the planet in the distant past. I'd have to say what they did with Jenova Lifeklinger is my favourite thing they've done with her though. A giant, disgusting creature sprouts glowing wings and then soars around shooting laser cannons, making the sense that she is an eldritch alien god more potent than ever. Beginning to wind this review down, I guess if I have one main complaint, it's that the world design feels very inorganic, with random poles and boardwalks that make no sense for the actual town and are clearly only there for the video game. Or all of the seated Queen's Blood desks hilariously coming equipped with a Buster Sword holder. Honestly speaking, fewer things annoy me in a game world more than cleanly marked climbing ledges where they have no business being. Rebirth was pretty bad for that. Cloning chocobo rest stops all over the map is a little clunky to justify as well. In my opinion, the campsites from Xenoblade 2 Torna and Xenoblade 3 are the JRPG gold standard for that rest mechanic. But that's a very minor nitpick in the grand scheme of things. I probably would have appreciated some kind of a breakpoint in the final 2 chapters as well. The way the story is paced after the point of no return, it feels like it is indeed asking you to commit to the 9-hour grind to finish it. But even then, that can be a positive too. I do love how large and drawn out the story's scale is. It was even a bit funny since the last game I played was Tekken 8, and the final bosses in these two are both like 10 phases longer than you'd expect them to be. Anyway, that's what I have to say about the game for now. Slap that 10 out of 10 right on it. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is incredible. Remake took them 5 years to make, yet this mammoth of a game only 4? How does that math check out at all? In summation, this is a love letter to fans of Final Fantasy VII, assuaging any lingering concerns I harboured regarding Remake's unclear direction, while emphasising that it does still understand the original plotline and its inspirations. I know that many will surely dispute this claim, say that it's still a sequel, say that it's still a time loop that invalidates the cringe, smelly compilation, etc., but as a bigger fan of FF7 than they, I simply refute them. Despite what the ending of Remake seems to have convinced everyone of, Rebirth is made with adoration and reverence for the content, storytelling, and general achievements of the compilation. As I said before, I will now say again, because there's just no better way to describe this. It's a unified Final Fantasy VII.